Welcome again to the world's longest running PSA, and the one made for the fewest number of people. I thought we would try another one that some realities would try and stall off for a long time. It's more possible verbal mapping of areas that are without any doubt nearly impossible to describe. I mean, they're difficult to see, but they're difficult to even say. But will that stop us? Why should it now? What it has to do with is a very, very, very sticky, age-old question that gets everybody. It's just that I realize that many people in our listening audience now are so civilized and genteel that they would not stoop so low as to bring it up. And so I'll bring it up for them. All that, man, as you'll see in a second, I assume, it makes people's head experience something similar to a kind of invisible monkey grip. It's a kind of a transmission lockup that would seem to be almost where this kind of stuff is pinned to the wall. But we're going on with it. What it has to do with is this. It's how someone trying to do this, whatever we're going to call it, a real revolutionist, a neuro-revolutionist, new intelligence, a subversive thinker, you follow me, of how a real revolutionist might look after his or her own interest in life as they might diverge from life. How a person, how an individual might be able, well, there's a good old crude way, people use this one, how you might be free or freer in an apparently otherwise unfree world. That one's been around for a while, but what it really has to do with is how there might be two paths of interest, one being an individual here and there. The revolutionists will assume that you have such an interest, so I don't have to keep adjectiving the damn thing to death and conditioning it to death, because most people's hair, it could be the kind of diverging interest that might be between the individual revolutionist and life itself. And as a springboard, could I refer you back to our great equation of I plus not I equals everything. The equation. For those of you that's never seen it, that's what we call it. Because in the secondary world, that is a wrap. I mean, just take it, it can be used in many ways, because at the world of the intellect, that is it. Or at the world as your forefathers, past, or even ordinary people today, they might think, or want to think of it as spiritual, etc. But it's having to do with the secondary world of the mind. At that area, a man's concept of I, plus everything that would be related to it at any particular time. My I's interests, my I's opinions, my I's wants, my I's beliefs, mine combined with all that's not mine equals everything. There are no asterisks to that. There are no footnotes. That's it. There's no way out. That is the secondary world in a skewed equation. But now, while others, we've discussed it in several ways, while others could take this, while ordinary consciousness, while ordinary intelligence could look at this and say, well, what this represents, without any doubt, is the quite real and distinct gulf I feel between me and everyone else, between my interests and everyone else's. That, yeah, I see what you mean. That's kind of interesting, because it is a kind of running struggle that I'm wanting to have my way in life. I want to have my opinions, which I have some faith in, which I may believe are the correct ones. But I seem to be constantly struggling against other people, whether because of their stupidity, because of their ill-kept mental habits, who knows what. But they see it, as we discussed before, as the I plus not I is like the gap. It is like the 6th or 16th unspecified sense organ, that not just my skin, but my space. It is the distinct gulf between me and everyone else. That no matter how close you become to someone, family, friends, lovers, but especially get out of your immediate circle, just into the general populace, there is a gulf. Sometimes the gulf seems to be fairly innocuous, other times it seems to be fraught with alligators and all manners of biting hostilities and anxieties. But there is no doubt that there is a specific gulf, damn near unbridgeable at times, between me and everyone else. So that's what that represents. Okay. Now, would you consider, we're getting to the more impossible part. I just bring that up as one possible because you should be able to see shortly you can play that off of what I'm describing. That would seem to be a fair, or at least not an unfair, polarized, intellectual, metaphysical, metaphorical interpretation of this. But may I suggest that someone who could see the damn near impossible, a revolutionist, might find in this equation a kind of different navigational aid, and that only someone who could think beyond the ordinary limits, to think in a new way, a neo-revolutionist, might be able to look after their own interest while in no way interfering with life's, which would be through other people, the others, the not I's, while in no way interfering with life and other people seeing to theirs. Now this is hard to see, I repeat, even hard to say, because this defies the very description that I just used, which I admit was not untoward. How is it that an individual, if we're going to start assuming right quick, if we're going to play fairly or accept the heretofore fairly regularly played games that life has certain aspects, has certain tendencies to be almost overwhelmingly mechanical, and we get carried away by some great political, economic, spiritual flows, who knows what. Fairly common area of debate in the secondary world about how free is life, how free is man. You've heard it all. And so once you take on any, or once you accept any hint that life might be less than absolutely free, which from even the most hard-nosed, unmetaphysical level, everyone would have to admit, you've got to understand that you are not free. You cannot drive as fast as you want to on the highways. You cannot take money from a teller unless you have an account there. There are all sorts of things you can't do, all the way from social mores that they may not put you in jail, but you can harm yourself economically. They're just things you cannot do in life. So how could it be on even a wide or a narrow theoretical level, or if you begin to have some strong suspicion yourself that life is damn near this great vivus machina, that it may be alive and there may be things that are a little more exciting, a little more vivacious than the cold steel of machinery, and it may be alive, it may be a living entity, this universe, but by God, it has some of the distinct characteristics of a great machine. So within all that, how is it possible that someone could have any kind of freedom? Now, remember, I just threw in using that kind of terms of how one might be free or freer in a non-free world. I prefer the description that I've already given you. How is it possible that an individual man and life, this is not theoretical, you should be able to see that you and life, and I'm saying life now, life is representing this equation at the personal level is not I's. That if it's possible for a man, an individual here and there, to look after, to have his own kind of agenda, his own little interests that might in some way not be in the main flow of life, then what you have would be these two diverse lines of interest, one of them being yours, let's say, and the other one being life's. comma, as through others, as through other not I's. You understand that they would be representative of life's interest, whatever they might be. The part that is, I was suggesting to use rather than worry about ideas about being free in some kind of unfree world, is might it be possible that you in life, remember life as functioning, as operating through others, that is through not I's, that I plus not I, how you might have two separate lines of interest, and that you might be able to look after yours without interfering in any way with life looking after its. That, believe it or not, would be a better description of how to approach it. All right, don't believe it then. I gave you a choice. I shouldn't have given you a choice. I said, believe it or not, and most people went, okay, I don't believe it. Well, as us Italian real estate salesmen say. Oh. Okay, how about an example? Our heads are full of them. I guess I'll pull one out of my head, but your heads are full of them and you don't know it. You think about examples of this every day. Those of you that think every minute, think about examples every minute. All right, I'll start off, I'll kind of make up one to kind of ease us into it. How about the great debate, let's assume that there is, over watch control, of whether people should have free access to own a timepiece, to have a watch, or whether in some way that the state should be involved, that is life, should in some way control it, maybe forbid it even. So let's assume there's a raging controversy going on, the question being watch control. All right? All right, in such a case, follow me right quick, a neurorevolutionist would not be either for or against it, comma, if he decided he wanted his own personal timepiece and this debate was going on, the possibility there was legislation pending or there was legislation proposed to enact watch control, and he was aware of it. Let's assume he was that aware of what was going on, and he decided, I want a timepiece. So he would go get one, you understand? He'd go ahead and get his now. But having no interest, no theoretical, no philosophical, no timexial, neural interest in the pros and cons of the discussion. But if he was faced with the possibility of watch control becoming a fait accompli, and he thought the day might come that I'd want my own watch, he'd go get one. Now after the proper debate went on, still assuming this was the kind of thing actually going on out there in the not I world, in the external world, after the kind of proper necessary debate went on, life would then decide whether others, not I's, whether the others should have watches or whether they shouldn't. And I'm not going into any kind of discussion. You have got to be fast enough to see this kind of stuff, since you can't see it slowly anyway. There's no way to stop and study it. If for some reason life decided right now, and of course we're talking about some specific time and some specific place in the 3D world. So we'll say our time and our place. If life suddenly decided, we're talking about life. Leave it to the children. Leave it to ordinary minds to think, well, you're talking about politics and government. Yeah, I know. If life decided that these people right now do not need watches, prohibitions, legal prohibitions will be enacted. And if life decides, well, that was a wild, why the hell did I ever think about that? Then life will have the politicians, they'll have the proposed legislation fail. And that's it. And everybody that wants watches will have watches. That's simply it. Can you see that regardless of how it went, and just trusting me, as impossible as this is on the basis of ordinary three-dimensional mentation being run by polarized energy, for me to start and say a real revolutionist would have no interest in the pros and cons of watch control, because in the ordinary world that couldn't be true, as you should know by now. If a man had any interest if a guy had any possible interest of ever wanting a watch, and he suddenly just woke up one morning and it was a brand new thing, and some leader out there in the city, that is, one of the life spokesmen, some not I, some other, stood up for life, thinking he was doing somebody else's bidding or his own wisdom, and says, what we need is watch control in this country. And he goes into some, I don't know what, don't make me make it up, about how the free, easy access to watches is, tearing down the moral, if not social, economic fiber of this country. Now, if an ordinary person heard this, then what I've already described is topologically impossible. That if a person had any possible interest in ever having a watch, then they would immediately understand, have an interest in this. What? Hey, come here, Martha. Did you hear that? Some guy's proposing. Can you believe this? You're going to die. This goddamn senator here from such and such, he is proposing watch control. And maybe Martha, maybe his friend or something says, well, what the hell do you care? You never owned a watch. And then suddenly the guy thinks, yeah, but by God, I want one now. They can't do this to me. The point being, you understand, an ordinary person would have no interest. What I have already described, forget about flying, it wouldn't even crawl, it wouldn't even exist. An ordinary person would have a pro or con feeling about watch control, or it said have no interest in it, right? Okay, I got that. So the rest of mine of me saying, well, such a person, a railroad revolutionist, if he heard this going on, there was any possibility he'd ever want to watch, he'd have no interest in this legislation, the debate. He'd simply write and get a watch now while he still could. But you understand, the ordinary three-dimensional world, none of that would work. And that is the kind of reason and logic that breaks down faster than a freshman's desire to become a philosopher after he's taken a week of Phil 101. What? I don't understand this. It would take somebody, back to what we were describing, our operational pronoun, a neurorevolutionist. It would be only such a person that in some way, that's indescribable really, could look after whatever interest they had. In this case, I might want to watch. Or as soon as you hear it might be impossible to get watches soon, I'm going to get one. But in this impossible way of having no personal interest, such as the outrage of what kind of dumb crackers and chowderheads are they putting in public, who's getting elected that would dare to try to even suggest that we outlaw or control it all watches. Either that, or as soon as a man hears it goes, now we're getting somewhere. Now, that's my kind of man. Boy, maybe I'll call some of my friends. We'll start a pro watch control lobby. That is life looking after its own interest. But understand, the real revolutionist, I'm saying this not in some offhand way. Let's say that the real revolutionist, if he has some kind of different way of looking at things, if he had some kind of alternative or new intelligence, I'm still telling you, I'm not being coy, I'm still saying it. It's not a matter of him saying, oh, I know what's going to happen with this. He might or he might not. He might have some kind of, we'll just call it a feel, but that's not the point. It's not that he would go immediately, well, this is going to fail. I don't have to worry, that's never going to happen. He might. I'm just taking middle of the road. That he doesn't know and he doesn't really care. He doesn't give a damn about some theory about watch control. Watches are running this country because he knows nothing running this country. Watches are running this planet. He knows that watches are not running this planet because it all gets back to man. That man made watches, men can stamp out watches. Now, if it wasn't that, let's see, what else could we use? How about a cigarette lighter? Guns. How about, yeah, guns. You know, something like that. You know, men make guns and guns kill people. No. A real revolution is somebody looking after their own private interest. Private interest. When I say private, I'm talking about interest you don't tell anybody. I'm talking about interest that you don't even tell your partner. Because we're talking about the two brains. Remember that guy tonight. Those of you, I assume you're musical enough. Timpani drums. Timpani drums come in sets, is why it reminded this guy evidently of his minds, M-I-N-D-S. And he pointed out that, well, they're loud and boomy, but if you mash on pedals, sometimes you can change the pitch slightly. Because I saw how much, how many people took notes as soon as you heard that. A real revolutionist, somebody looking after their own private, I'm talking about private, not just secret. I'll throw in secret as another adjective, it doesn't cost any more, but it's beyond secret, because if you know how to do it, which of course you don't know how to do it, you can't do it, but if you know how to do it, you don't even tell yourself. Because yourself, as soon as you hear about so-and-so is proposing national legislation to control the private ownership of watches. And let's assume that yourself, or maybe yourself was kind of taking a snooze, but you, the revolutionist part, went, I'm going to get me a watch, just in case. And as soon as you say that, your partner goes, huh. And your partner is going to be pro or con. Your partner is going to have some reaction, because if you had some, then your partner, by the way, is not divorced from you. Your partner is going to go, huh, I was afraid it'd come to this. Your partner is going to have some polarized feel about it as soon as you say, well, you just say to yourself, well, I'm going to stop by today and get a watch. I mean, that's it. No discussion. I'm just going to stop and get a watch. The unsaid part is just in case. But the point is that you decide, I want to watch. Who the hell wants to take a chance? I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not interested in the debate, but I'm going to stop and get a watch. And as soon as your partner hears this, he has a pro or con feeling. And when I say that it has to be private, in fact secret, is you don't respond to it. You do all your life. That's what the internal dialogue. That is what passes for human intelligence. Because everybody else, they agree with themselves, or sometimes they argue with themselves. It's the same thing. But if this was an ordinary person, we're talking about the kind of dialogue that is the polarized flow of energy in the human nervous system at the area known as the Big B, Bainbridge, no, the brain. It would pass for intelligence. It passes for reflective, contemplative thought, because you go, ha, I'm going to stop and get a watch. And immediately your partner jumps in, yeah, boy, those goddamn fools, they're going to ruin everything. Yeah, let's go get a watch. And you say, yeah, I'm with you. That is not revolutionist thought. That is not looking after your own private interests. You're now part of the ordinary battle. Because your partner's always going to, if you're interested in it, your partner's always got some opinion, pro or con, about whatever it is you say. And so as soon as you decided, stop and get a watch today, your partner goes either pro or con, like, yeah, hey, boy, good thinking. And he begins to curse all these dumbasses and people, or else he takes the other view. A real revolutionist does not respond to that. You don't say, well, I agree with you, because he doesn't agree with you. A real revolutionist doesn't agree with that part. He's not a real revolutionist. We're just playing with words. It's got nothing to do with me getting a watch. That is life's agenda. Life is looking after its own interests. I got so many things to do. I am trying my best to find that new CD collection of James Brown, stuff that was only done in Europe. And now you're talking to me about gun control or a new atomic weapons treaty. I got important things. I got my own interests. No offense to life. I don't, let them sign treaties, hold marches, parades. Everybody can dress up. And I'm not being smart ass. Of course, I'm being a little to try to get your attention to who I'm doing. But a real revolutionist, he's got his own thing. I don't know what it is. I said James Brown, but of course I know that some of you have higher class taste, and you're interested in people like Von Supe or George Gershwin. If your interest were truly your interest, they are going to be diverse from life. But now I picked this example. It may be life, in my example, in some way is now concerned over the private ownership of watches. Don't ask me how. I know it's ridiculous. Who knows why? A real revolution is not interested in why. Only an ordinary person is interested in why, because an ordinary person's interests are whose? Life's. That's why they're ordinary. Nothing wrong with it. But it's only ordinary people that as soon as they hear whatever the going thing is, we're going to ruin the planet and kill ourselves. And good, intelligent, at least at the city level, the intelligent people nowadays have finally shaken the slumber from their eyes. And they're the ones that will now stand up and say, yes, Even captains of industry say, yes, we have got to clean up the mess we're making now. That's life's agenda. If life's agenda is your agenda, if life's interest are your interest, you're not a revolutionist. You may enjoy hearing about this, but you're not. But we'll assume, I didn't do that to be negative, we'll assume that all of you are. Is why I'm trying to get you to see that it's possible. Because when you do it in a way that can't be described, and which is not stopping me, your interest can be foreign to life, different to life. It doesn't have to be that weird. I'm saying in this case, it's very unweird. You hear that there's proposed legislation to control the private ownership of watches, and you don't have a watch, and it just, God knows why, again. But let's say you just decide, I'm going to stop and get a watch. Now. You know, who knows why? It's just maybe some, I don't know why. Maybe if I jumped in your brain and say why, you'd say, I don't know. But if they're going to say I can't have one, I'm going to get one now while I still can. You know, because you can pick up a watch for what nowadays? You know, $2 or $3. I want one. Okay. But that is not life's interest. But by the same way that you might say with some degree of validity that you don't know why you want one. Of course, I'm stretching again because a real revolutionist would not ask himself why. That's why I said if I could jump into your brain in some way and ask why, you might not know why. Because there is no why. It's only life that has a why. And that's part of man's job is to say, well, here's why we're doing this. Because life has nobody to speak for it except man. But that's still not the reason. But life has its own agenda. Life has its own interest. In this case, you'd be ridiculous. It's a waste of time to think, unless you just want an intellectual hobby. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But as far as you trying to immediately come to some conclusive insight as to, well, wait a minute, I know why life is proposing. Why life suddenly has some interest in watch control. Come on, you got to be, I start having to make up more of this, that you can start saying, all right, if men didn't have watches, it would be harder, for instance, to engage in holding up a bank because they have such odd hours you wouldn't know exactly when it opens. It would interfere with criminal activity. I don't know. Maybe you could get even more metaphysical about, well, it would be better if men were not so tied to the tyranny of man-made time. Man would have more time to reflect, to write music. Life could have its own agenda and have nothing to do with you unless you're ordinary. And if you're ordinary, it has everything to do with you because that's the only interest you have. Now at that level, you can certainly, as they do, as they're supposed to, you can certainly deny it. And it cannot be disproven. If you try and tell somebody who's out here to barricades, out marching in the street in favor of abortion or gun control or atomic treaties or do away with nuclear power or whatever the latest was, and you said, you don't have any personal interest in this. You do understand civilized, reputable, intellectual experts are out there doing that, always have been. And they would look at you like you were a piece of neural lint. If you tried to tell them something like, wait a minute, you don't know what you're doing, you're just out here doing this. You know, they'd figure you're from the Middle Ages. Well, they'd obviously infer correctly, if you did that, that you're anti whatever they're for. They would correctly recognize you as the opposition. But if you tried to tell them, hey, you got no personal interest in this, what does it matter? And then you come up with whatever it is, which can't be proven. You can say, what does it matter whether they're building nuclear plants on the other side of the world? And they go, you never heard of Chernobyl? All right, what do you care whether people you never heard of get abortions? Do you realize that you and I might not be here? There's an answer for all of it. Anytime you tried to, this is a side trip, I hope I didn't lose you there for a second. If you tried to attack an ordinary person, that is an ordinary intelligence, if you tried to attack it in some way and say the interest you say you have in life, you know, feeding the hungry, making the world more just, making the world safer, whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with it, but if you tried to tell an ordinary person, intelligent people, if you said that is not your personal interest, that's life's interest, you do understand you're wasting your time. You're as dense as they are. You're as ordinary as they are, because it can't be proven or disproven. They certainly can't see it. And of course, you don't see it if you were dumb enough to tell somebody that. But do you understand? There's no way you can't prove it. It can't be proven. their interest, in other words, has to be life's interest. And it doesn't matter whether it's pro or con, because every pro has got to be con or it's not going to move. And we can't never get around to the third force to bring in the tie-breaking weight to move something. But whatever the situation is, whatever the potential new activity, such as watch control, it's not going anywhere if just life makes one guy. It's the first time anybody ever heard the term. Let's assume I didn't make it up. A guy stands up in the halls of Congress and says, I'm here today to speak on a matter that's gravely concerned me. I've been thinking about, pondering on it, blah, blah, blah. Watch control. And it's the first time any human's ever spoken that. If life really has some interest in this take going forward, then as soon as this guy says it, you do understand. Just being pro. If right now life, in a weak moment, life out in the sun too much or something, life thinks we're to have watch control. So it makes this guy stand up and says, I'm here to say something about watch control. You do know by now it's not going anywhere. It's got to have three forces running, but it's not going anywhere. There's no possibility. Unless and until, very quickly, that somebody sitting there in the halls of Congress, probably, let's put it that way, thinks, watch control? The man has finally gone dotty. Or wait a minute, I'll fight this tooth and nail. Whatever the hell that means. So there's got to, you understand, it doesn't matter. It's not that pro or con matters, but life's interest always rests upon, at the very basic level, a pro and a con. And so if you have an interest that is outside the pro or the con, I got to repeat it because it doesn't make any sense and it's impossible in a three-dimensional thought realm. But if your interest is not tied to a pro or con, that you got no interest in watch control, but as soon as you hear about the possibility, you think, I'm going to get a watch right now. But if your interest is pro or con, then it's not your interest. It's life's interest. But do you see, just sort of, that it's almost just possible, almost talk about it if you don't listen real good, that you could have an interest of your own. Like, all right, I'm going to get a watch. But I got no interest in this goddamn debate. You can strike the profanity there. I just wasn't necessary. I just wanted you to, because I didn't mean to display or infer that you'd be having hostility about it. It's just that, I got no interest in that. I may or may not know what life's up to. It may or may not amount to anything. You may never hear again the term watch control. It may turn out to just be a cheap laugh. It may be remembered every now and then as some kind of deranged anomaly that took place. As some of you can isolate such things in city governments, but you may never hear of it, or it may become the law of the land. But you understand, a real revolutionist, his interest, he could have none, remember. He could hear it and not go get a watch, not have any concern. But you understand, if your interest is not the same as life's, then you may have no interest, not get a watch, or you may go get a watch. It's the same thing. But you can do it. A few people can, if you know how. You can pursue your own interest and in no wise interfere with life's. And if I must say it, and in no way support it. It's just that in a way that people have tried to debate and can't come up with an answer, because I've already admitted it can't really be described, because in a sense it cannot be done in ordinary thought. Forget the primary world, you can't do it physically. We're talking about this world. But the whole idea about how can we be free in a world that's not absolutely free anyway? And they can't come up with anything except to write a new book about it. There is a way, there's a place, as we were putting it crudely, in the human brain that you can think in such a way that is not absolutely tied to the polarized run of energy that makes the three-dimensional world here seem to be operative and alive. Because everybody else, if you're interested in something, you're interested in it. Well, what does that mean? Well, you got some feel for it. Yeah. You got some almost opinion. Well, yeah. I mean, not kill anybody. No, but if you got an interest in it, you've got an interest in it. Yeah. Of course, then the thing is that you can't tell me is, well, if you got an interest in this, that is, life put it out, and if you got an interest in it, You ain't got a personal interest in it. You're nuts. If you can be interested, if you were, I'm not saying that you should in every particular case, but if you had an interest in life, in some ways you're going to have an interest somewhere in it or it wouldn't exist. But if you have an interest in something, such as, I think I'll get a watch, and no interest in any debate, I'm just using watch control, but it could be anything in the secondary world. We're not talking about anything in the primary world that could be a matter of your absolute or your specific survival, tangibly, physically. But here, which is what drives, what makes civilized, contemporary man's life partially acceptable. So I hear from reports from the city. It is here. And if it's here, there's a pro and a con to it. If it's here, the interest arose from life. That you first heard watch control, and you suddenly felt, now I have a reason to live. I never cared that much about, abortion one way or the other, and gun control. Who the hell cares? Plus I got a closet full of rifles. I don't care what they do now, and I don't really care about the environment. It just bugs me. God intended if He didn't want you to throw beer cans out the window, He wouldn't put them in cans. He'd put them in big old barrels or something. But now, finally, I got a reason to live, because these dumb heads have gone too far. Watch control, huh? In other words, it would always seem that it arose out here, notwithstanding the fact that we're all in the closet. But it's not as though, well, I thought up this. It always comes out here. A revolutionist withal. Not literally, but compared to that, it's as though you can come up with your own interest. They're never absolutely original, because even if you're going to draw your original animal, as you know, all you can do is stick wings on a frog, horns on it, wheels on it, and say, well, here's an original animal. Here's my original interest. And it's not possible. But it feels as though your interest, relatively speaking, can be original, can be personal, in that you have no interest in the debate in that same area that's going on in the not-I world, which there'll always be some, or else you would have no interest. That is, it wouldn't even exist. You couldn't think about it. So you can't come up with a whole new field if whatever seems to be your area of interest in life. It could be more than one, but if yours was music, art, literature, anything, your interest cannot be, it's just not possible in some way to be absolutely original. But the revolutionist line that I was trying to distinctly limb away from life is, even though music, the area of music, the hobby, the interest already exists. You didn't make it up. Legislation, the world of government, such as the proposed legislation of watch control. Let's say that's your hobby. It's all right. But your hobby, even though it seemed to arise from out there, your interest in the hobby can be singular in a revolutionary sense, in the respect that your interest is not tied to the debate out there, pro and con. It's not that. It's easy for me to say it's not that complicated after I just made it that complicated. That your interest could be, I'm going to get myself a watch today, while having no interest in whether they ever pass such cockamamie legislation. Don't take that. Again, it's not an attack on legislation. It's just that I'm trying to get you to see, you go get a watch, but not to say, well, boy, I'll show them mothers. They're not going to take away my rights as an American. Don't a wristwatch? Ha ha, I'll show them. It's not that. Or it's not that, wait a minute, now I've got a reason to live. I got to find the pro watch control group. There must be one here in town. I'll look them up. I'm going to join up immediately. I'll write that man. I'll support him. Your interest can't be absolutely unique. Whatever your interest is already in life. But your interest can be revolutionist. Your interest can be individual in the sense that your interest is not tied to the pros and cons of everyone else's interest, which that is always the basis of everyone else's interest, or else it couldn't live. Either way, take the watch control again. Whether they pass legislation, whether it sinks, either way, life, through these other people, looked after its end. And if you were out that day and you bought yourself one, then life, through other people, through all the not eyes, looked after its end, and the revolutionist did his. They didn't conflict. Nobody knew about it. I mean, it's no secret that you got a watch, you wear it, or at least when you bought it, the guy that sold it to you, somebody said, did he just buy a watch? Yes. There's no secret, but in a sense, it's almost a secret. Because you bought a watch and it had some connection, as everything does in the closet, everything in a limited dimensional reality, that you buying a watch that day was certainly connected with you turning on the morning news show and a senator says, I am going to introduce legislation, national legislation, to enact control of private ownership of watches. That's why you went and bought one that day. But your interest is not in the debate, because once you got a watch, you don't care whether they pass the legislation or not. And so whether it passes or not, you understand life had its way. Should we point out the obvious? Life, through other people, looked after its own interests, and the revolutionists looked after his. They did not conflict, but the revolutionist interest was also not absolutely tied to life's. Do you understand? And I picked out something that seemed to be tangible, like the actual wristwatch or something. But now we're talking about that which is a bit less tangible. What I was really getting at, just getting warmed up here in tonight's sermon, was in the world of ideas, which is what that's about. It's not about the actual control of wristwatches any more than it's far removed or is more dangerous, as it might seem, about gun control or the kind of destruction or the control over atomic armaments from country to country. Now that would seem to be something important. I'm not talking about some kind of dumb-ass idea about whether you can own a wristwatch or not. It's the same thing. If life does not want people to have bombs, would you trust me? We don't have time to prove it. If life decided it didn't want, maybe somebody specifically, maybe the fine people in Sweden, if life decided, I don't want the Swedes to have a bomb, the Swedes ain't going to have no bomb. If life decided, I don't want anybody on this planet to have a bomb over 50 megaton, then don't ask me how, I'm not going to prove it, but something would happen. Like all the bombs over 50 megatons overnight would wilt. They would rot, they would rust, they would leave town, they'd disappear. That's it. Life will look after its own interest. But the surprising thing is, there's a way in which you can look after your interest in a secondary world. That's the only place, because we've got to get to that next time or soon. In the primary sense, we're not talking about, there is no freedom from the primary world. Those who try it are nutso. Those who try it are suicidal. There's really no freedom from the primary world. It's here. And the freedom is that you can be dealing with what would apparently be the same area, watch control. And yet there's a way in which you could look after your interest, as some of you had it, and it does not conflict, nor is it tied to life's interest. But there, you can both look after your interest, and they do not come in conflict, but it cannot be described and it cannot be taught. And even on the surface, it probably does not sound as though It would have any interest to ordinary people. And yet, it's the very thing that they talk about. It's the very thing that life makes people dream about, because it is the picture of tomorrow. It is this dream of how could I be more free? How could I be more intelligent? And that's what they're saying without knowing it. But it's the dream of, well, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow I'll be able to push through my ideas, because I seriously, personally, I am in favor of watch control, because there's no doubt we would be better off as a people. We'd be better off as the race of man if we would do that. And so maybe tomorrow, maybe I can have a greater impact. Maybe I'll write a book. That's the kind of dream. The revolutionist can almost, in a way, experience it and execute it now. But his interest, even though they may sound to be similar, like I'm going to go get a watch. Aha! That's because you heard about the guy proposing watch control. And the truth is, yeah, that's what made me go get a watch today. But it's not the same thing. Because the revolutionist understands life's up to one thing. Now, I'm not even sure where life's going with this. They may outlaw the private ownership of watches, they may control it, and they may not. I don't give a damn. Again, not being cynical, I'm putting words on stuff that a revolutionist wouldn't put words on. But it's like, I don't care. That's life's interest. That's interesting. Maybe I'll keep up with that. That is weird. Can you believe that life has made a man with a suit and a tie on stand up there and propose watch control? And life gets more and more curiouser. Can you believe that? I'm going to go get a watch. But as far as the debate over this, I don't care. Life's going to look after itself. See, but ordinary intelligence doesn't know that. Now, life needs help. God needs our help. Nowadays, the planet needs our help. Right. Yes, sirree. Don't want to put one over on Mother Earth. Yes, sirree. That's all. Are we still...